Salesforce development is huge. How do you really know what to focus on? Between Lightning Web Components, Apex integrations, there's so much to wrap your head around. I get asked this question all the time and this kind of stuff from my students, and it's hard to know what to focus on. So in this video, I'm going to go over the top 5 must-know things that you need to focus on as a Salesforce developer. Hello, Salesforce Ohana, Walters954 here, 18 times certified Salesforce MVP. In this video, let's jump into 5 super important things that you need to know as a Salesforce developer. And what you'll kind of find out if you are maybe an aspiring Salesforce developer, BA, or admin, these will apply to you as well. The first thing that you've got to know is the Salesforce data model. This may come as a shock, but a lot of developers that write code on the platform don't understand the data model and how the different objects and fields interact with each other. A lot of times this happens when you are maybe a developer in another platform and you come over into Salesforce and you just try to write code and bang things out for everything. And that's not really the Salesforce way, because there's so many different tools that you can use on the platform to build out all the different business logic and rules and automations that make the platform great. On top of the data model, make sure to learn all the different Salesforce automation tools at your disposal. We know that workflow rules and process builders are going away, so you may want to focus in on flows, but legacy orgs may still have some of those older automation tools. There are other tools like approval processes that you need to wrap your head around as well. This is super important as a developer because you don't always want to solve every problem with code. You want to try to use out-of-the-box solutions first before jumping into code, just so that you don't overcomplicate your system. Now, if you're brand new to Salesforce and Salesforce development and want to know where to get started with these, definitely check out Trailhead. That's the best place to kind of wrap your head around these introductory Salesforce things like the data model and automations, things like that. I recommend getting the beginner and intermediate admin trails done so that you can learn these foundational items. The number 2 must-know item are Salesforce triggers. Make sure to get a handle and understand how Apex triggers work, because they are the gateway into a lot of different automations that go on with your Apex code. So on top of getting the basics down of just being able to write triggers and understanding how they work, make sure that you understand some of the best practices around triggers, like using logic list triggers or using trigger frameworks to structure your code in a better, more scalable way. This can also help you with other trigger best practices like bulkification and stopping recursion for those governor limits. If you're just getting started with triggers, of course, check out Trailhead, but also the Apex documentation around triggers gives you a good baseline understanding. There's also a Salesforce Mentor trigger course that I've created that I'll link down below. What do you do when your users ask for a custom interface? Well, this is where Lightning Web Components come in. Lightning Web Components enable you to create amazing custom UI experiences inside of Salesforce, ones that can look just like if Salesforce themselves created them or something completely custom on its own. LWCs are great because they're built on those modern web languages like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So if you're a JavaScript or a front-end developer already, it's going to be really easy to transition over to Lightning Web Components. What makes this the 3rd must-know developer item is how easy it is to manipulate your Salesforce data inside of Lightning Web Components. Any of your Salesforce data, you can easily surface those in Lightning Web Components and present them in different ways for your users to be able to interact with the data the way that they need. I've been developing these components for a long time now, so I'm very familiar with nesting them inside of each other and passing data around. But when you're just getting started, try to focus on using the out-of-the-box components and sticking to the Lightning design system for building out your components so they look more like Salesforce created them. Now, if you're looking to learn these better, Trailhead has some really cool Lightning Web Component projects to start with, so jump in there. And again, over at Salesforce Mentor, since LWCs are so important, I've created a LWC Fundamentals course that goes over all of the important things that you need to know about LWCs. The fourth essential thing, and it might be a little controversial, but it's actually testing. So being able to write test classes and even debugging slash troubleshooting your code more efficiently. If you've never heard of testing or writing test classes before, it is essentially writing code to check that the code that you've written, any automations and things like that, are working as expected. If you have code that takes two numbers and adds them together, you can write a test class that gives your code those two numbers and checks that the output is the addition of those two numbers. Testing is huge in the world of Salesforce because you can't deploy anything to production without at least some tests being written on the code that you've created. So it's super important to get familiar with writing test classes for all of your code, creating meaningful tests, and some of the best practices around test classes like using data factories. Learning to write good tests can be really daunting, so I recommend taking it one step at a time and building upon your testing knowledge. I generally recommend starting out with trailheads and reading the documentation around Apex testing. Testing is also something that we teach in the Developer Kickstart program, part of Cloud Code Academy, since it's so important. A lot of admins are going to be jumping around when I mention this final item on the must-know list, and that is SOQL, or the Salesforce Object Query Language. Knowing SOQL is great because you're able to query data from your Salesforce org without needing to build cumbersome reports or use some third-party analytics tool. Once you start getting familiar with some of the ways to build efficient queries, so using the where clause, limit, and order by clauses, they can really help you optimize your workflow and retrieve data from your org. And of course, jumping into some of the advanced SOQL techniques, so using parent-to-child relationships or even child-to-parent relationships, pulling that data back so that you can serve your users even faster, whether this is data uploads or exports of information. Knowing SOQL is essential for everyone's workflow inside of Salesforce. Now, if you're trying to learn SOQL a little bit better, I generally recommend using campapex.org or even apexsandbox.io because they have interactive lessons for you to jump on and learn the different queries that are available. I talked about a lot of different concepts in this videos. We had Salesforce data model and how to use configuration, triggers, Lightning Web Components, testing, SOQL for retrieving that data. It can be overwhelming, but stick with the resources that I've given you. And if you know other resources, leave a comment down below so that I can add them in to the description and we can help grow together. Jumping into all those resources on your own is great, but I've found that a lot of people kind of need a little bit more guidance and more community. So that's why I've created the Developer Kickstart program, which is a 16-week hands-on developer class that brings you and a cohort of all aspiring developers through a path of learning Salesforce development taught by senior developers like myself or other MVPs that we have as instructors. In the Developer Kickstart program, we learn about all of the concepts that we talked about here and a lot more like job readiness and integration. So if you're interested in learning more, jump on the wait list in the description. Some of you might have noticed that I didn't actually talk about any Salesforce developer certifications, and you can be amazing without them, right? You can learn code and do all of these things without certifications, but a lot of hiring managers and recruiters are using certifications to assess your overall skill on the platform. So with that in mind, I actually created a video that goes over the top Salesforce developer certifications to help you get a job. So check it out over here. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Walters954. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I believe in you.